There are men who spent years trying to become the perfect boyfriend. Loyal, available, hardworking, emotionally supportive, and still got left behind. And the worst part? Most of them never understood why. She finally admitted. Why she left a good man, and it will shock you, is not just another relationship video. It's a brutal psychological truth that most men only discover after heartbreak destroys the version of themselves they thought women wanted. Because sometimes, being a good man is exactly what hides the real problem. And when she finally admitted why she left a good man, everything changed. So if you're tired of shallow dating advice and want to understand what actually creates attraction, respect, and emotional connection in modern relationships, subscribe to the channel right now. We're building a community of men trying to become stronger, wiser, and harder to break emotionally. And we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Topic 1. The lie most good men grow up believing. Most men grow up hearing the same silent promise since childhood. Be kind, work hard, treat a woman right, and she'll never leave you. Sounds fair, right? And for a long time, a lot of men believe that with their whole heart. They become responsible guys, avoid conflict, try to please everyone, hold their emotions in, pay the bills, do everything the right way. But almost nobody warns them that relationships don't work like some automatic reward for good behavior. And that's exactly where a lot of men start losing themselves without even noticing. The problem is that many men spend years trying to be chosen, instead of trying to be authentic. It's like that guy who stops hanging out with his friends, gives up his personal goals, and starts living emotionally around the relationship. At first, it looks like love. It looks mature, it even looks romantic. But little by little he loses his own energy. And strangely enough, the more he tries to guarantee that she'll never leave, the more anxious he becomes about losing her. The irony? That silent anxiety completely changes the way she starts seeing him. A lot of men in the United States are living exactly like this today, without ever talking about it. They work all day, try to be the good guy, do everything for their partner, but still feel like something's missing. And when the relationship starts getting cold, they're completely shocked because, in their mind, it makes no sense. How did she lose interest if I was always there for her? But emotional attraction rarely comes from stability alone. And when a man finally realizes that, he starts noticing little signs that used to seem invisible. Topic 2. He did everything right and slowly lost himself. At the beginning of the relationship, he had presence. He had ambition, opinions, hobbies, friends, routines, energy. He was the kind of man that made her curious because there was something alive inside him beyond the relationship itself. But without realizing it, a lot started changing. Little by little, he organized his entire life around her. He canceled plans easily, said yes to everything, avoided anything that might create discomfort. And even though it looked like love, in reality, he was giving up his own identity. This is something almost nobody talks to men about. There's a huge difference between loving someone and disappearing inside the relationship. A lot of guys think the more available they are, the more valued they'll become. So they start checking messages constantly, replying within seconds, abandoning personal goals, quitting the gym, stopping themselves from learning new things. Some of them even lose that natural spark they had before the relationship. And the cruelest part? Most of them are doing all of this believing they're being amazing partners. That's why so many good men get blindsided by breakups, because in their minds, sacrifice should increase love, but emotional attraction works in a much more complicated way. A woman can admire a kind man and still feel like something inside the relationship slowly died. Not because he became a bad person, but because the man who once had life, direction, and authenticity slowly started disappearing. And when that happens, the small signs of emotional disconnection start showing up in ways that are almost impossible to notice. Topic 3. Women rarely leave, suddenly. Most men believe the breakup happened out of nowhere. To them, everything seemed relatively normal, until the day she sat down and said she didn't feel the same anymore. And that's when a lot of men go into complete shock. Because while he was focused on keeping the routine running, she had already been emotionally disconnecting for months, maybe even years. The problem is that emotional disconnection rarely arrives loudly. It shows up through small details that seem harmless at first. The conversations start losing depth. The excitement slowly disappears. That spontaneous desire to share little things starts fading away. The touch changes, the look changes, and the most dangerous part? The energy of the relationship changes before the words do. A lot of men ignore this because they keep fulfilling the role of being a good partner. They pay the bills, help out, stay physically present. But relationships don't survive on function alone. A woman can recognize everything a man does and still feel like she can no longer emotionally connect with who he became. And maybe the most painful part is this. A lot of times she tried giving signs before leaving, small comments, complaints that seemed silly, phrases like, "You've changed," or "We don't talk like we used to." But many men interpret that as emotional drama or temporary stress. After all, in their minds, if there was no cheating, abuse, or huge fights, then the relationship should be safe. But the truth is that many relationships end long before the official breakup happens. And when she finally decides to tell the truth, the man realizes he was only seeing the surface the entire time. Topic 4. The truth she was afraid to admit. And then comes the most uncomfortable moment of all. The conversation many men never imagined they'd hear. Because when she finally admits the truth, it usually isn't something simple like, "You were bad for me." Honestly, that would be easier to accept. What destroys a lot of men inside is hearing something much more confusing. "You were a good man, but I just didn't feel it anymore." And that sentence haunts people for years because it doesn't seem logical at all. But emotional attraction doesn't operate on logic alone. A woman can deeply love a man and still feel like she lost emotional connection with him. And many times, she feels guilty for it. Guilty for being with someone kind, loyal, hardworking, and still not being able to feel admiration, tension, or genuine desire anymore. That's why some women take so long to admit how they really feel. Because they know the man will probably respond with, "But I did everything for you." And honestly, maybe he really did. The problem is that doing everything for someone doesn't replace emotional presence, identity, and healthy masculine energy. A lot of men believe love is built only through constant effort, almost like relationships are some kind of emotional contract. But human connection is way more subjective than that, and when she finally puts it into words, many men begin realizing something brutal. Maybe the relationship didn't end because there wasn't love. Maybe it ended because, in the middle of trying to become perfect, he stopped being someone she could emotionally admire. And that realization completely changes the way he sees relationships moving forward. Topic 5. Attraction. Dies when a man abandons himself. There's a silent phrase that destroys a lot of relationships without anyone realizing it. She became the center of his life. And look, that sounds romantic in movies, but in real life, it almost always creates a dangerous emotional imbalance. Because when a man abandons his mission, goals, and identity just to live around the relationship, something inside him starts dying. And the craziest part is that it usually happens slowly, almost invisibly. He doesn't even realize when he stopped being a priority to himself. A lot of men fall into this trap believing they're showing love. They start measuring their self-worth based on their partner's approval. If she's happy, they feel good. If she seems distant, their entire world falls apart. Little by little, the relationship stops being an important part of life and becomes their entire life. And that creates massive emotional pressure because no person can carry the weight of being responsible for someone else's emotional identity forever. That's where attraction starts fading, even without huge fights or major conflict. Emotionally strong men understand something most people learn way too late. Healthy love does not require self-abandonment. In fact, the strongest relationships usually happen when two people continue growing individually while walking together. It's the man who keeps evolving, training, building projects, maintaining friendships, learning new things, and having his own direction. Not because he wants to seem distant, but because there's life inside him beyond the relationship. And when that energy disappears, many women start feeling something they can't fully explain. Like the man is still physically there, but his essence slowly faded away. Topic 6. Men were taught to be useful, not desired. Since childhood, many men are taught that their value comes from being useful. Be strong, solve problems, work hard, protect, provide. And sure, all of that matters. But the problem begins when a man believes that's all he needs to develop, because almost nobody teaches men about emotional presence, real self-esteem, charisma, lightness, or deep human connection. So they grow up believing that if they become useful enough, they'll automatically become desired. That's why so many men feel completely lost after a breakup. In their minds, they did exactly what society told them to do. They built stability, took responsibility, tried to be dependable. But attraction doesn't come only from the ability to solve problems. A woman can admire a hardworking man and still feel like something emotional, exciting, or alive is missing from the relationship. And many men only discover that once they're hearing phrases like, "You deserve better," or "The problem isn't you." Phrases that sound kind on the surface, but leave a huge emptiness underneath. Maybe one of the greatest emotional tragedies for men is this. Many men spend years trying to become necessary, without realizing that being necessary is not the same thing as being desired. And there's a brutal difference between those two things. Magnetic men usually have something beyond practical value. They have direction, authenticity, emotional calmness, humor, passion for their own life. They're not constantly begging for validation. And when a man finally understands this, he realizes he may have spent years trying to earn love through sacrifice, when what truly created connection was something much deeper and invisible. Topic 7. The painful lesson. Most men learn too late. Maybe the most painful truth many men discover is this. Losing someone doesn't always destroy a man. Sometimes it reveals the man he stopped being. And that pain hits on a deep level because it forces him to look at his own life without distractions. Suddenly, the silence after the breakup starts revealing things that were hidden beneath the routine of the relationship. The abandoned dreams, the weakened self-esteem, the constant anxiety for approval, the feeling that he spent years living on autopilot trying to be enough for someone else. And it's interesting how many men only start rediscovering themselves after a major emotional loss. They go back to the gym, not just for their body, but because they need to rebuild mental discipline. They start studying again, creating projects, traveling, reconnecting with old friends, taking care of their health, reading books that expand their mind. Some start with simple things, like stopping themselves from living glued to their phone waiting for messages, or relearning how to be alone without feeling empty. And little by little they realize something almost shocking. The strongest version of themselves never appeared when they were desperately trying to be loved. It appeared when they started rebuilding their own identity. At the end of the day, many men realize way too late that true attraction never came only from kindness, sacrifice, or the need to please people. It came from the energy of a man who had direction, presence, and a life of his own. A man who loved without abandoning himself. And maybe that's exactly why some losses become hidden awakenings. Because once a man finally understands this lesson, he never sees relationships, love, and self-worth the same way ever again. Conclusion. And maybe that's the hardest truth for a man to accept. Sometimes heartbreak isn't the end of your life. It's the moment you finally meet yourself again. Because at the end of the day, no relationship will ever save a man who abandoned his own identity trying to be loved. The real question is, how much of yourself have you slowly sacrificed just to keep someone from leaving? How many goals, passions, friendships, and parts of your personality disappeared while you were busy trying to become good enough for someone else? A lot of men never stop to ask themselves that until it's too late. But the men who do, those are usually the ones who come back stronger, calmer, more confident, and impossible to emotionally manipulate. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think being a good man is enough in modern relationships? Or do most men misunderstand what actually creates attraction and respect today? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this video gave you a new perspective, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because this channel is for men who are done living blindly and want to understand relationships, psychology, confidence, and emotional strength on a deeper level. And remember, we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers.